Discover the incredible transformation of a lazy boy. 30 days that changed everything forever. Jake stared at the pile of forgotten canvases in his grandmother's art studio, a place that once buzzed with creativity, but now felt suffocatingly heavy with loss. A part of him wanted to sell everything, erase the clutter and the memories that haunted him. But another part craved the vibrant legacy of the woman who had once painted passion into every brushstroke. Unable to reconcile these conflicting emotions, he found himself frozen in the stillness of the dust-filled light that spilled from the old windows. He threw himself back into the chair, the familiar weight of lethargy settling in. A self-proclaimed lazy boy, the thought of stepping into the artist's shoes felt overwhelming. Doubts swirled in his mind. Could he really follow in her footsteps? What was he really doing with his life? Surrounded by his childhood home's faded wallpaper and the faint scent of baked bread from the bakery down the street, he felt trapped in a rut he seemed unable to escape. Every day blurred into the next, a murky existence filled with video games and binge-watching as the world outside continued spinning. The reality of his inertia prickled at his conscience, awakening fears so deep they sent his heart racing. It wasn't just his own dreams at stake. He sensed the unrevealed burden rested upon his family. He recalled overhearing his parents arguing, frustrations bubbling over as they faced the harshness of their reality. His mother, worn down by grueling shifts, wore her exhaustion like a heavy cloak. His father, nearing retirement, spent more time dreaming about what could be than what was. The burdens weighed heavier on his heart as he ran his hands over the canvases in front of him. They were mere reminders of his grandmother's unfulfilled dreams and, by extension, his own. What if he failed? What if he didn't measure up? The fear of ridicule from an art community that already branded him a slacker bubbled to the surface, sending waves of anxiety. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The stakes rose even higher as he languished in his swirling thoughts. Just as he considered giving in to the comfortable numbness, he thought he heard his grandmother's voice echoing in the back of his mind, urging him to embrace his true potential. Could he truly rise to the challenge? Or would he once again retreat into the safety of his old habits? The question coiled around his thoughts, vicious and unyielding. As he sat, staring blankly at the canvases and feeling trapped within himself, he realized he had only two choices: to step into the sunlight of possibility or languish in the shadows of inertia. Goosebumps broke on his skin, anxiety coursing through him as he wrestled with the dread of failure. The blank canvas loomed with every unresolved doubt, a reflection of the rift that festered within him and his family. Time pressed down in a relentless tick-tock of impending consequence, leaving him on the cusp of an uncertain future with no clear way forward. The air in the studio felt charged, electric with unspoken potential, as Jake took a deep breath and slowly stood. It was time to confront the canvas that mirrored everything he feared and hoped for. For too long, he had watched from the sidelines, ruminating as others molded their visions into art. Enough was enough. Today was where he would begin to forge his own story. With a trembling hand, Jake picked up a brush, feeling its weight as it rested against his palm. It was both familiar and foreign, a tool for creation that felt incongruent with his identity. As he brushed the bristles against the canvas, he fought off the waves of self-doubt that collided with each stroke, the trepidation that chanted he was merely an imposter. Forget them, be honest, he whispered to himself, as his grandmother's passionate voice urged him from within the depths of his memory. This was about more than just painting. It was a journey into the core of who he was, a chance to define himself beyond the shadows of complacency. Jake studied the canvas, envisioning the scenes that once filled the space with life, the bright hues of his grandmother's vibrant sunsets, and the delicate strokes that captured laughter and joy. With a bold flick, He plunged the brush into red paint, allowing the color to flow, exuding warmth and anger in tandem. As he painted, an abstract concept began to surface. He didn't need to mimic his grandmother's art, but should instead create something that encapsulated his feelings. A chaotic series of splashes, representing his internal struggle. With each stroke, a different facet of himself unfurled, a hidden layer of determination and resilience unearthing itself beneath walls built from fear and anxiety. He allowed himself to make mistakes, leaving behind those tight, rigid expectations as the canvas took on an unexpected rhythm, pulsating with purpose. Soon, he found himself dancing around the studio, lost in the flow of creativity. The colors became a catharsis, sweeping away the remnants of his laziness with each visceral sweep of the brush. It was exhilarating, liberating. He wasn't just painting, but weaving together an emotional tapestry that reflected his emerging identity. Midway through his artistic venture, the reality of his family's struggles crept back into his thoughts. How many times had his mother worked late into the night, tired and worn out just to keep food on the table? How often had he witnessed his father sink into despondency instead of pursuing his own passions? Did they see him as the disappointment he feared? A wave of responsibility washed over him. He couldn't afford to remain in this cocoon forever. It was his turn to break out and contribute, to be more than just Jake, the slacker. But reality was never simple. What if he failed? What if his art was no good? He could visualize the judgment of others, the whispers that would undoubtedly follow his endeavors. Yet as he struggled with these doubts, he also felt something shift within him. Isn't resilience born from risk? Wasn't vulnerability the cradle of growth? Determined to push these thoughts aside, Jake decided to take a step forward. He would enter the local artist workshop that was often a breeding ground for creative talent. At that moment, as he painted furiously, his mind pulled away from the fears of judgment and toward a burgeoning desire to connect with others who had also walked the path of uncertainty. When he finally stepped back to observe the chaotic yet expressive piece before him, a sense of pride unfurled within him. What he had created was raw and unrefined, but it spoke to a truth he never truly recognized. The next step emerged clearly. He would seek feedback, embrace next-level challenges, thrust himself into that intimidating artistic world. He felt an unfamiliar thrill course through him. The time had come to face the daunting art community he had spent years avoiding. Would they see him as an imposter or recognize the effort behind his transformation? Jake did not know the answer yet, but he felt the burning desire to leap into the unknown. The journey ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, yet it beckoned with promise. With a newfound determination igniting his spirit, he gathered his supplies and stepped into a new chapter, the door opening wide to his creative transformation, leading him to uncharted territories. Would he find the courage to share his art despite the fears waiting to ensnare him? As Jake stood in front of the local artist workshop, the vibrant sounds of discussion and laughter reached his ears, reverberating through his chest like a drumbeat. He felt a mixture of excitement and dread, each conflicting emotion battling for dominance within him. This space, alive with creativity and inspiration, threatened to amplify his insecurities, exacerbating the fears that had long kept him at a distance. He hesitated, fingers clenching around the strap of his bag as he contemplated the choice before him. Should he step inside and embrace this opportunity or retreat to the comfort of his solitary, familiar existence? The familiar voice of self-doubt echoed in his mind, taunting him with thoughts of inadequacy. But another voice, a quieter, more resolute one, tapped gently at the back of his consciousness. It was the phantom of determination he had unearthed while painting, urging him to push through the uncertainty. Gathering his resolve, Jake entered the workshop, his heart pounding with every step. The space was an eclectic mix of easels, paints, and scattered canvases steeped in diversity. A cluster of artists stood in animated conversation, gesturing emphatically as they shared their latest inspirations. He felt like an outsider about to crash a party he had received no invitation to. "Hey there, first time?" A cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. A woman with a canvas covered in splashes of yellow and blue stepped forward, her bright smile infectious. Yeah, Jake replied, feeling small under her warm gaze. I'm thinking about trying out the workshop. Great, Amia, you'll fit right in. She beamed at him, a brightness that contrasted sharply with his swirling apprehensions. Despite his minor victories in the studio, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong here, among those who freely expressed their artistic selves. Jake managed to slip into a corner, a makeshift square formed by other participants, but his palms felt clammy as he unpacked his supplies. He watched, absorbing their conversations, picking up snippets of motivation and struggle. It struck him that they, too, were fighting their own battles, questioning their abilities and worth as artists. For the first time, his doubts seemed less isolating. After a brief introduction from the instructor, the session began with a challenge. Each participant would create a piece that could be interpreted as identity, an exercise designed to encourage vulnerability and self-exploration. The request sent Jake reeling. Identity, his biggest struggle, lay naked and unprotected, inviting scrutiny. His instinct was to retreat into abstraction. Yet even as he toyed with shades of paint, the image of a self-portrait began to form in his mind's eye. There was the temptation to backtrack into familiar chaos, but beneath the surface, he felt an urge to unveil something more personal, something real. This exercise was not merely about artistic skill but introspection. Each brushstroke was a bridging of gaps between his fears and aspiration, his past and present. As he painted, emotions welled up, a tangle of regret, hope, and determination swirling together. The colors bled into one another, messy yet expressive. Each stroke dripped with honesty, and Jake began to understand. This exploration was his way of confronting the shadow he had long been avoiding. But then a whisper of panic surged through him. What would the others think? The voice of judgment, both internal and external, echoed ominously. He hesitated, brush hovering mid-air. But in that moment, his gaze caught Mia S. across the room. She was engrossed in a conversation about a piece she had crafted, her face animated with unguarded enthusiasm. It hit him then: art was not about perfection. It was about connection. What if he could transform his fear of exposure into strength? That thought solidified within him, finding an anchor in his resolve. He would share his work, but more importantly, he would embrace the process without apologies. As Jake leaned deeper into his creative flow, feeling the freedom of expressing his identity, a flicker of anticipation ignited within. He might discover hidden truths about himself along the way. Yet, as he breathed life into the canvas, the weight of uncertainty whispered persistently, teasing the edge of his newfound courage. With every layer of paint, Jake edged closer to self-awareness, but would he have the strength to present this intimate part of himself when the moment arrived? The pressure mounted as the end of the session approached, and he couldn't shake the question. Would acceptance await him, or would vulnerability invite ridicule? Digging deep for resolve, he committed to facing the unveiling of his truth, even as shadows of doubt hovered nearby. The final minutes of the workshop stretched like hours, each second tasting of uncertainty. Jake's hands trembled slightly, his brush gliding across the canvas. Blending hues that told more than mere colors, they unveiled fragments of his soul. With each stroke, an unfamiliar electric current surged through him. Ideas bounced around his mind like fireflies, illuminating memories, desires, and fears he had long buried. He was peeling back layers, but a nagging doubt clawed at him. How much was he truly willing to reveal? As the instructor announced that they would soon share their artworks, Jake turned to glance at the other participants. They exuded confidence, engaged in conversations that resonated with mutual encouragement and artistic camaraderie. It seemed almost surreal. How could he think he belonged among such vibrant, expressive individuals? An athlete on the sidelines, perhaps, but never part of the core game. Mia S. artwork caught his eye. Brilliant yellows blew up across her canvas, merging seamlessly with radiant blues. It embodied joy and spontaneity, qualities he envied. Could he channel courage from her display? He could feel the shift within him, a flicker of appetite for risk. The instructor's voice broke into his swirling thoughts. Remember, this task is about authenticity. Speak your truth through your art. Authenticity. The word echoed in his mind, planting seeds of courage. Wasn't that what he craved? To show his true colors without fear of judgment? As they gathered for the sharing, Jake fought the urge to shrink into the shadows. It was daunting. He felt exposed, yet alongside that stark fear, he recognized a burgeoning sense of purpose. His brush had danced between chaos and clarity. Now, a part of him wanted to step into the light. He had poured pieces of himself into that paint, a reflection not just of who he was but who he wished to become. When his turn arrived, uncertainty morphed into a challenge. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself. "This is my identity piece," he offered, nodding toward the canvas. "I approached it as a self-portrait, layers of what I have experienced, what I am afraid of, and what I hope to be." His voice trembled, unraveling a contemplative silence among his peers, but he pressed on. "The colors speak not only of happiness but also of sorrow," he added, his words flowing more freely as he embraced the honesty brewing inside him. "I often feel like I'm hiding parts of myself, afraid of how I'll be received." He blinked away the pang of vulnerability, sensing judgment in the air, but also an unseen support coiling around him. Mia's nod from across the room buoyed his confidence. Others leaned forward, attentive, their faces reflecting a cocktail of empathy and curiosity. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't as frightening as it had seemed. As he stepped back from the canvas, an unfathomable weight lifted from his chest. What had begun as a swimming sea of doubts transformed into a lake of self-acceptance, calm and serene. The applause from his peers reverberated through him, raspy and genuine, instantly dissolving the last remnants of fear. Yet, just as he began to absorb the warmth of their response, a pang of anxiety resurfaced. Had he truly embraced the process of self-exploration, or was this just the beginning? The voice of his inner critic chattered again. What if he faltered now that he had exposed his truth? The instructor began to highlight the need to embrace additional challenges beyond this workshop, citing upcoming opportunities to exhibit work publicly. That invitation seemed to loom over him like a storm cloud, casting a shadow of doubt once more. As he contemplated his future steps, he realized he was standing at a crucial crossroads, a moment defined by choice rather than inevitability. Could he face the next challenge, fully realizing the expanded breadth of his potential? Or would he retreat back into the safety of his doubt? With his heart racing, Jake clenched his fists, determined to explore whatever lay ahead. This was his moment. The echo of the previous fear began to fade as he contemplated an even larger canvas that lay beyond this workshop, beckoning him toward the unknown. In that uncertainty, he recognized his charge. The time had come to face what vulnerability truly meant in his artistic journey and personal evolution. With a newfound spark igniting within him, Jake gathered his supplies and whispered to himself, "I'm ready." Yet, as he took the first steps toward his next decision, the real question loomed heavily: would he continue to confront the depths of his creativity, or allow the tide of insecurity to pull him back into familiar waters? The sun spilled through the workshop's windows as Jake sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. The gentle hum of the engine masked the chaos swirling in his mind. He had shared his truth, yet the thought of exhibiting his work haunted him. What if he failed? The weight of his peers' applause still lingered, but it felt precarious, as if it might shatter at a moment's notice. Deep within him, a new voice battled the familiar echo of self-doubt. "You can do this, Jake," it whispered, each word gaining strength. He had stepped into an arena of vulnerability, and now he had to follow through. An exhibit could either cement his progress or ignite his anxiety anew. He exhaled sharply, a sound cleaved from the depths of his gut, desperately pushing aside lingering insecurities. Deep down, he craved validation not just from others but from himself. He awoke to the dawn of a remarkable realization. Bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. The first step was to return home and confront his canvas again. As he unloaded his supplies, he felt the blend of excitement and trepidation meld into a purposeful energy. His initial rush of color and emotion began to seem like a tapestry upon which further ideas could unfold. That evening, scrutinizing his self-portrait, he sought not just to refine it, but to expand on its themes, welcoming uncertainty as a welcome acquaintance rather than a foe. Days turned into a symphony of creative exploration. Jake awoke early, losing himself in the paint. Each stroke, an affirmation of progress. Each layering of colors, a silent manifesto of his evolution. He tested new techniques, pushed textures to new extremes, and, most importantly, embraced failures as stepping stones. His apartment became a sanctuary of artistic rebellion, and the rhythm of his brush transformed into the melody of his thoughts. Concurrently, Jake decided to immerse himself in the local art scene, seeking inspiration beyond his studio walls. He visited galleries and museums, attended open mic nights where poets poured their hearts into verses. The vulnerability of others illuminated his own journey. Walking through the bustling streets, he noticed how creativity thrived everywhere, like roots burrowing through city cracks. One rainy Thursday, while exploring a small art co-op, he stumbled upon an exhibit featuring emerging artists. A sense of urgency welled up within him. These were the same opportunities his instructor had referenced. Why not submit his work? But the bubble of excitement burst upon contemplating the possibility of rejection. What if they laughed? What if they dismissed him as just another amateur? He stood frozen, caught between the desire to showcase his art and the suffocating grip of self-doubt. Yet a flicker of his earlier conviction rekindled a call to authenticity. The defining moment echoed once again, "You can do this." That evening, he stared at his phone, hovering over the submission link. With the steadiness of a surgeon making a life-altering decision, he pressed send, the act punctuating his acceptance of risk. Was this courage or folly? By deciding to share his evolution, he was, for the first time, ready to confront the aspects of himself he had shielded for so long. But as night deepened, shadows crept in, infusing his mind with questions that rattled him. Had he acted too hastily? Would he be able to withstand the critiques and comparisons that surely awaited him? Jake sank back into his thoughts, battling between the exhilaration of potential acceptance and the terror of once again putting himself out there. The balance seemed dashed against the rocks of apprehension, propelling him toward the next daunting chapter of his artistic pilgrimage. As dawn broke with tentative golden rays, one compelling thought braided through his mind. He had ignited the flame of transformation. But what awaited him as the journey unfolded? The reality of the exhibit loomed heavy, full of promise and dread alike, daring him to confront the very nature of his creativity. Would he continue to grapple with self-worth while striving for growth? Or would the critique of his work send him spiraling once more into doubt's cold embrace? The unexpected ping of his phone jolted Jake from his sleep. The message notification pierced through the fog of his dreams, resonating with a sense of urgency. Heart hammering, he blinked against the morning light filtering through his curtains, recalling the decision that had shifted everything. He reached for the phone, fingers trembling slightly. As he swiped open the message, his breath hitched a response from the art co-op. "Thank you for your submission. We'd like to include your work in our upcoming exhibit." A rush of potent emotions flooded him: excitement, disbelief, and a nagging whisper of dread. Had he really earned this, or was it merely a stroke of luck? The validation he sought tangled with questions that clawed at his resolve. Jake tossed the phone aside, heart racing but mind clouded with trepidation. This was just the beginning, and along with it came the expectations of presenting himself to the world. He spent the day oscillating between elation and anxiety. His self-portrait, the one he had poured his essence into, now loomed larger in his consciousness. With each passing moment, it transformed from a piece of art into a silent judge of his worth, an embodiment of every fear he harbored. In the weeks that followed, he became a fervent participant in the deadline-driven flap of preparation. Each brushstroke on that self-portrait felt twisted. It no longer sang with the joyous experimentation he had once embraced. Now it felt like a rehearsed performance anxiously awaiting critique. Jake was caught in a cycle of overthinking. Every imperfection sang louder than the harmonious notes of creativity that had once framed his exploration. Determined to battle these insecurities, he sought refuge in the small art community he had begun to immerse himself in. Conversations with fellow artists often proved enlightening. They spoke of their own journeys through periods of vulnerability and insecurity. He found camaraderie in their shared experiences, each story a reminder that he wasn't alone in his struggle. Yet, despite the growing bonds, Jake felt a nagging pull toward isolation. Did he truly belong in this world of creativity? It became harder to silence the internal whispers questioning whether he was merely a pretender. The time had come to face that demon, he mused as he stared into the depths of his self-portrait, attending to each detail with renewed diligence. He decided to push himself further, setting up impromptu critique sessions with trusted friends from the community. Was opening himself to feedback not an opportunity for growth, despite the sting of vulnerability? The first session was agonizing. Every comment felt amplified in the confines of his mind. Yet, instead of retreating, he captured their insights, integrating them into his process with thoughtful reflection. Each critique left an imprint not only on the canvas but within himself, propelling him closer to the realization of his potential. As the exhibition date inched closer, Jake noticed a profound shift within him. It was not simply about acceptance or applause anymore. It was about portraying authenticity through art. The fear that once paralyzed him began to morph into a flicker of determination. While uncertainty loomed still, it had become a companion rather than a foe. On the eve of the exhibit, exhilaration coursed through his veins, threading together the myriad emotions that surrounded him: the weight of possibility, the dance of anticipation, and the thrill of unveiling his journey. The moment of truth awaited. As he prepared to present not just his work but his own evolving narrative, a deeper resolve ignited within him. He was ready to confront the culmination of his efforts and fears, standing at the precipice of something transformative. With a sense of clarity, he stepped away from the self-doubt that had tethered him for too long. Tomorrow, he would showcase more than paint on canvas. He would reveal his growth, searching not for validation but for something much more profound. What awaited him at the exhibit would determine not only the trajectory of his art but the very nature of who he had become in this creative journey. Would he emerge triumphant, or would familiar shadows engulf him once more as he opened the door to the world? The day of the exhibit dawned, bright yet tinged with tension. Jake stood before the mirror, searching for confidence in his reflection. The self-portrait hung behind him, a representation of his journey, a canvas filled with his struggles, evolution, and essence. Today it would finally meet the world. With each step toward the gallery, a whirlwind of thoughts swirled in his mind. Even as his heart raced, he grappled with the notion that art wasn't merely a conduit for expression, but also a stark mirror reflecting his insecurities. Would others see the rawness and imperfection twisting within the layers of paint? Would they unveil the truths he had buried beneath brushstrokes? As he entered the gallery, an overwhelming array of colors, textures, and voices enveloped him. Each corner buzzed with laughter, whispered criticisms, and shouts of admiration. The air, thick with anticipation, carried the fragrance of paint and varnish. He felt both excited and vaguely nauseous, the juxtaposition of hope and dread battling within him. Moments later, the first guests trickled into the room. Some paused to admire various pieces, their gazes flickering over works he had never considered noteworthy. Jake stood in the shadows, watching people interact with the art, his heart ticking in tandem with the hum of chatter. He debated whether to engage or remain an observer, his preferred posture in social situations. A surge of courage pushed him forward. He approached a small cluster of admirers examining his self-portrait. Their expressions hinted at intrigue. One woman, her head tilted slightly, murmured, "There's something hauntingly beautiful about this piece." Jake's breath caught. Who was she to dissect the depths of his soul etched on the canvas? As if sensing his presence, she turned, locking eyes with him. "You captured so much emotion here," she continued, her voice steady yet warm. "Thank you," he managed to reply, compelled to abandon his shyness. As they discussed the elements of his work, he began feeling the intricate dance of leap and retreat, where joy intertwined with the specter of fear. Each compliment felt like both a bomb and a dagger as the weight of judgment loomed large above him. Gradually, the conversations around him swelled. He found himself drifting from group to group, engaging in dialogues that unfurled his confidence thread by delicate thread. Each interaction chipped away at the wall he had constructed, revealing not just his art but the passion and intent fueling it. This was not merely a presentation of his work. It had transformed into a canvas of his transformation. Yet, amidst the unexpected warmth of acceptance, an unsettling thought crept in. Was he merely a reflection of others' desires? Did he shift and change to fit the mold of appreciation, sacrificing his authenticity? Maybe he had wrapped himself in the armor of conformity while yearning for genuine connection. Drawing a breath, he steeled himself against that creeping doubt. Arguably, this exhibit might not just be about his art but about tackling those deeply rooted questions about identity and belonging. With each passing moment, the shadows whispering self-doubt started to thin, leaving in their wake flickers of clarity. As the evening progressed, Jake surprised himself by engaging fully, sharing not only the technicalities of his work but the emotional tapestry behind it. The conversations morphed into a kaleidoscope of experiences, his life comet-like in its trajectory, illuminating shared struggles and triumphs. Finally, he was standing tall not as a pretender but a creator, a participant in this vibrant artistic dialogue. With the night winding down, as applause filled the air following the brief speech he had mustered the courage to give, the sense of triumph was undeniable. He had presented his true self and it felt liberating. Yet, in the depth of his elation, another realization clawed at him, a desire for continuous growth, for more than this momentary victory. What lay ahead was not simply an appreciation for his art but a transformative journey into deeper realms of his creativity. As Jake exited the gallery, he felt the burgeoning urge to challenge himself further, to not fall into complacency, but to dive deeper still. How would he continue to push the boundaries of his own narrative? Would he dare to confront the darker hues of his artistic psyche now revealed? The answers awaited as a new chapter beckoned, rich with potential and the wild uncertainty of creative exploration. Jake stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the gallery lingering in the background like echoes of distant applause. He had offered pieces of himself to the world and found them received with warmth rather than scorn. Yet the question remained, where did he go from here? The thrill of acceptance and acclaim felt like a starting line rather than a finish. As he walked home, Jake replayed the night's conversations in his mind. The woman who had admired his self-portrait, what would it be like to be fearless enough to dive deeper into those conversations rather than just scratch the surface? With each passing step, he felt an urge to capture the momentum he built, to forge ahead into uncharted territories of his creativity. Yet, as determination surged within him, a flicker of uncertainty danced on the periphery. Was his newfound courage strong enough to explore the parts of his art that he had hidden away? Returning home, Jake placed a hand on the cold surface of his easel, which stood like a sentinel in the dimly lit room. He contemplated his next steps. Earlier, he had sensed an undercurrent running through his work, a darkness he had often shied away from exploring. Maybe he could confront that darkness rather than sidestep it. He hesitated for a moment, then grabbed his palette and brushes, feeling the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. Setting up in front of the blank canvas was daunting. The empty space stared back, a stark reminder of the work yet to be done. Thoughts clamored in his mind, a blend of fear and excitement twisted into a knot in his stomach. Did he have the guts to face the aspects of himself he had often relegated to the shadows? What if the next piece fell flat or became something darker than he had anticipated? But wasn't that the very crux of true artistry? The risk of failure, the vulnerability required to unveil one's depths, was inherently part of the process. With a deliberate breath, Jake squeezed paint onto the palette. He moved fluidly, recalling the rapid movements of his brush that had led to the birth of his self-portrait. This time, he envisioned something different, something raw and unfiltered. He began to layer colors, allowing instinct and emotion to take the helm. The strokes became bolder, laden with the weight of unarticulated feelings. They were bursts of anger, sorrow, and liberation all blended together. As he painted, fragments of memories danced at the edges of his mind. Times he had felt inadequate or unseen, moments that had distorted his view of himself. Each layer was cathartic, with every brushstroke a confrontation of the fears he had previously avoided. He lost track of time, enveloped in the haze of creation and revelation. Yet, as he applied the final strokes, exhaustion tugged at him. The fatigue wasn't merely physical. It was the emotional toll of intertwining with his vulnerabilities. He stood back and surveyed the chaotic, vibrant mess. The raw energy was both thrilling and unsettling. It was a deviation from his previous works, a journey into dark territory that demanded reflection. In the silence of his studio, Jake felt a thrill of exhilaration pierce through the veil of tiredness. This new piece was not just an exploration of fear and anger. It was also a manifestation of resilience. Could this be his path forward? Genuine authenticity required not just showcasing beauty, but grappling with the unsettling truths of existence. As he cleaned up, Jake pondered what would come next. The rawness of his experience needed to be shared. Would others connect with these layers of turmoil juxtaposed against resilience? Would they see the beauty not in pristine perfection but in the honesty of struggle? He felt a siren call to exhibit this work, an invitation to showcase not just the polished version of himself, but the unfiltered, authentic journey of creation. His heart racing, Jake reached for his notebook, jotting down thoughts and plans, feeling the electric pull of his own potential. How would he prepare not just for another exhibit but for a deeper exploration into his artistry? The prospect thrilled him. The answers lingered tantalizingly just out of reach, tempting him to delve even deeper. Courage beckoned him to embrace the transformative power of vulnerability head-on as the next chapter unfolded. Would he find the strength to confront the darkness within and harness it for greater creative heights? As he closed his notebook, a surge of anticipation raced through him. He was on the brink of something profound. Jake awoke the following morning with remnants of his late-night creativity still lingering in the air. The dawn light trickled through the window, illuminating the edges of his recently completed painting. It appeared alive, pulsating with emotion, as if it were reflecting the tumult within him. He felt compelled to dive back into the artistic sea of his thoughts. But first, the reality of the day demanded attention. A cup of coffee nestled comfortably in his hands. Jake perched on the stool in his cluttered kitchen, lost in thought. He glanced around the space, cluttered not just by visual noise but by remnants of his procrastination, remnants of fear. It was time to embrace a new routine, to allow his mornings to fuel his passion. He heard the echo of voices from last night, a mixture of praise and critique that clamored for dominance in his mind. A new resolve took root. Jake decided to create a structured plan for his artistic journey, one that would force him to confront the parts of himself that he had often buried under layers of ambition and avoidance. He grabbed his notebook again, the pages flickering with the urgency of untold stories. What if he committed to study one facet of his emotional landscape every day? Each day could unravel another thread in the intricate fabric of his identity, steering him through memories he overlooked and emotions he suppressed. Jake scribbled down his ideas, each word igniting a fervor within him. On the first day of his plan, he would confront anger. Jake reflected on the anger that had colored so many days of his life, an emotion he typically deflected through sarcasm or silence. He settled down to sketch, allowing rawness to seep onto the page. As he drew, he let memories rush forth, instances of perceived betrayal, moments where he had felt powerless. His sketches morphed from simple lines to chaotic swirls as he channeled these emotions into form. Energized, Jake quickly realized how much untapped creativity lay just beneath the surface of his habitual detachment. The act of creation itself began to make sense. Art was not simply form, but a dialogue with his fractured self. With each stroke of his pencil, he unlocked feelings he hadn't given voice to, recognizing the liberation in expressing anger not as destructive, but as transformative energy. Day by day he went deeper, sadness on the second day, joy on the third, fear on the fourth. Each session became more intense, with tears accompanying brushes and laughter weaving through sketching. He captured it all, joy lost in the rush to please others, sadness bloomed from friendships laced with conflict, a fear of vulnerability that stifled his authenticity. Yet within this excavation of self, questions loomed. Would this raw introspection resonate with others? Could sharing these intimate markings of existence pit him against his greatest fear, the fear of rejection? Jake sat in stillness as the thought seeped through him. His own self-doubt, kindling smoldering questions about whether his art could elicit true connection, surged forward. Was authenticity too risky? With each passing day, the threshold between his authentic self and public persona felt like it was thinning. He sought honesty, yet the risk of exposure hummed around him like a ghost. But as he stood back, surveying the bubbling creativity around him, he began to contemplate bigger designs for his work. Why not take it a step further than the gallery? What if he engaged with communities that yearned for connection through raw emotion? The thought electrified him. This was the way forward, a convergence of vulnerability and openness. Creating a safe space for dialogue through art seemed revolutionary. But how could he manage such an undertaking without losing his voice in the process? As uncertainty brewed alongside eagerness, Jake grabbed a blank canvas and began painting once more. This time his brush danced not just with colors but with the weight of expectations and possibilities. The swirling emotions took on a life of their own, fusing into a chaotic yet symphonic masterpiece. His heart raced as he envisioned a collective exhibiting art not just for beauty, but as a means to confront shared fears and triumphs. Was this his new path? The thrill of taking risks was intoxicating, but with it came waves of dread. Would he dare to pursue this collaboration, extending the breadth of his creativity into new territories? As uncertainty punctured through his thoughts, Jake placed the brush down and took a deep breath, feeling an energy he hadn't sensed before, propelling him towards a reckoning. Now was the moment to be brave. And just as he gathered his thoughts to forge ahead into this uncharted terrain, a message pinged on his phone, cutting through his spiraling deliberations. It was from the woman who had admired his self-portrait, the one who had ignited this very journey. Her message read simply, "I'd love to see your latest work." In that moment, everything shifted. The invitation, tender and unexpected, loomed before him, igniting both trepidation and exhilaration. Would he be able to share not just his art, but the deeper truths woven into his fabric? As he resolved to respond, Jake felt the vibration of a pivotal choice calling, hinting at transformations yet to unveil. Jake stood before the newly stretched canvas, the sunlight spilling into his studio like a promise. This was the moment he had long awaited, the culmination of his journey from a boy shrouded in doubt to a man equipped with the brush of authenticity. The exhibit had provided him with a validation he never expected, yet that was only the beginning. Gone were the days of lingering in the shadows, questioning every brushstroke. He moved confidently, his palette alive with colors that represented not just emotion but also the courage he had forged through vulnerability. Every hue he mixed seemed infused with the lessons of his past, the jagged edges of fear, the soft strokes of joy, and the heavy layers of sorrow. Finally, he was no longer just an observer but a co-creator of his narrative. The realization that he could blend these disjointed parts into a cohesive whole resonated in his bones. He acknowledged that anger, sadness, fear, and joy didn't need to be staged separately. They could intertwine and coexist harmoniously on the canvas, much like they did within his life. With each stroke, he celebrated the power of reckoning, making peace with the darker aspects of himself, led to an expansive exploration no longer confined to personal expression. He envisioned an art piece that would not only reflect his journey, but also resonate with others who grappled with similar struggles. This was his manifesto, a declaration of interlinked emotions that defined the human experience, inviting connection, not comparison. Jake recalled how the warm applause of the exhibit had quelled his fears, cradling his insecurities, and replacing them with a sense of shared purpose. His next step was to create a communal project, a collective exhibition where artists could showcase their unfiltered emotions, welcoming not only critique but also acceptance. Empowering others to voice their stories would be a testament to the idea that art could indeed heal. Days morphed into productive bursts of creativity, fueled not by fear, but by the collective energy of shared struggles. Jake connected with local artists, inviting them to participate in an open dialogue about both their art and emotional landscapes. Together, they brainstormed ideas, each story shaping the larger narrative they would present to the world. The collaborative sessions were electric. Colors merged as stories flowed freely, a workshop of catharsis revealing the beauty in imperfection and humanity. Vulnerability took center stage, flipping the script from mere artistic display to an immersive experience that drew viewers in rather than pushed them away. They embraced each other's authenticity, celebrating the healing art could facilitate. As the opening night of the exhibition approached, Jake felt anticipation coursing through him like a current. He was no longer alone in this journey. It was a tapestry woven with the threads of others' experiences and perspectives. Each artist would present a piece that connected their emotional truth, accompanied by narratives that spoke to vulnerability and artistry alike. On the night of the event, the gallery pulsed with an energy that felt alive. It thrummed with laughter, tears, and the richness of shared stories. Jake watched as guests engaged with one another, absorbing the depths of expression on display. People no longer stood as passive observers. They became part of an evolving conversation, exchanging thoughts and reveling in the connections formed through artistic exploration. As they veered from one piece to another, Jake stepped forward to share. He felt solid, grounded in the legitimacy of his journey. "Tonight isn't just about what we have created individually," he began, his voice steady, "but rather what we can build together. Let us shed the fear of judgment and engage with our truths. This is a space for vulnerability, a sanctuary where art becomes a bridge to healing." Faces lit up with recognition, nods affirming their shared understanding. This was not merely art. It was a pulsating representation of existence, a tapestry of struggle and triumph enveloped in creativity. Jake felt an overwhelming pride swell within him. He had become the man his grandmother would have been proud of, keeping her legacy alive and vibrant through his own evolution. Conversations flourished, and despite the chaos of emotions, the air was filled with connection and acceptance. Each piece sparked dialogue, and soon they were aligning under the canopy of shared experiences, the collective weight of honesty suppressing the preconceived notions of consequence. As the gallery doors closed that night, Jake stood amidst the last lingering guests, hope radiating from deep within. This journey was not solely his. It was a mosaic of all who dared to face their truths through art. In that moment of realization, he understood. He had not only embarked on a transformative self-exploration, but he had also paved the way for others to find solace through their own voices. In the weeks that followed, the collective exhibition continued to thrive, each event further solidifying his newfound confidence in himself and his art. Jake had conquered the lethargy that once defined him, carving out a space where acceptance, authenticity, and connection flourished. He had emerged not only as an artist but as a leader, someone who inspired others to connect through vulnerability and creativity. And so, with every brushstroke and every shared conversation, Jake transformed his once isolated journey into an expansive narrative of possibility. He had stepped beyond the confines of fear, proving that overcoming oneself was the most significant accomplishment of all. If you're ready to embark on your own journey of transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for stories that inspire growth and resilience. Leave a like now to help fuel the algorithm and reach more hearts. I want to hear your reactions and theories about this ending. Comment below. And don't wait even one more second to share this powerful story with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread the message of overcoming and creativity together.